someone shout from a crowd of fed up people getting told they should calm down.
Movements all speak to one another, like they always build upon one another.
Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people have existed throughout history, facing discrimination, inequities under the law, and incidents of hate and violence.
These are also conversations that have been happening for decades.
In America, you can see the evolvement of LGBTQ people fighting for their rights, from the creation of the Society for Human Rights in 1924 to Stonewall, and grassroots movements birthed out of the bigotry and biases they faced for decades. Dr. Kalima Young with Towson University.
I just want to make sure that we understand that there is no linear narrative about the queer rights or gay rights movement. And I also want to make sure that we are clear that POC and gender nonconforming folks have been in these streets from Jump Street.
We sort of create this idea of linear history in
CeCe Green, who's a teacher in the district, says it was the energy from the Black civil rights movement that helped fuel the fight for gay rights.
A lot of the idea of questioning like who has rights and who doesn't, and a lot of getting that conversation started is on the backs of the civil rights movement, right? Like people were not attempting to have these conversations until Black people stood up first.
There were queer people in the civil rights movement, like we talk about Bayard Rustin and things like that. Like that was like one of the main people that were a part of the civil rights movement that was queer.
Bayard Rustin was one of the two main organizers for the March on Washington back in 1963. But due to criticism over his sexuality and LGBTQ people at the time, he often stayed behind the scenes, influencing and advising civil rights leaders.
Bayard Rustin was still struggling with being a queer person in that movement and whether or not his identity, his whole self, could show up and be visible in that movement.
And fast forward to 2020, more and more LGBTQ people are now openly and unapologetically leading in this movement, presenting the issues that matter to them and insisting that all Black lives matter.
The idea that queer folks are not sort of cowering in the corner and not having their contributions erased from this movement is what feels different this time.
The LGBTQ community has seen several wins and losses over the years when it comes to their fight towards equality. Michael is taking a deeper look at the state of LGBTQ rights in America and explains what our panel believes are the next steps. You can catch that part of the story on Get Up DC tomorrow morning.